A lot of Americans don't know that by time election day comes, you've had a huge chunk of America that's already voted. 37 states allow early voting. Right now, as you listen to my voice, you have millions of people across the country that are voting already. So by time November 8th comes election day, it's estimated that around 40% of all the votes that will be cast will have already been cast ahead of time. So the voting is happening right now. It's not just about election day. So what's happening right now regarding the voting? Well, that matters. Now, I would argue that this is bad news for Republicans and bad news for Donald Trump because Donald Trump needs to pick up steam over the course of the next couple of weeks. His best chance of winning this election is if things turn around and things start trending toward him in a strong way over the course of the next couple of weeks. I hope that happens. But here's the problem. Let's pretend it does. Let's pretend that a week from now, which would be 1 week before the election, Donald Trump has actually narrowed the gap and he's, we'll say, tied with Hillary Clinton. Right now, the Real Clear Politics average of all of the polls has Donald Trump down by about 5 points or so, 5 to 6 points over Hillary Clinton nationwide of all of the polls. You got a couple of polls out there that show him tied, but then you have other polls like the ABC News poll that has Hillary Clinton up 12, which, by the way, don't fall for some of those polls because, like the ABC News poll, for example, of the sample size that they used for that poll, only 27% of the people in that poll were Republican. And then you had, I think, 36% that were Democrat, and then the rest were independent. So a lot of these polls that are taken skew heavily to Democrats. And so I don't believe a 12-point ABC poll. But in all fairness, I don't necessarily believe the 1 or 2 polls that show them tied or even Trump winning by a point or so. My guess is what's accurate and what's really true right now is Trump probably is behind about 5 or 6 points nationally. That's the Real Clear Politics averages. So the reason I say that early voting at this point, I would argue, is going to hurt Trump is because right now you have those independent voters and whatever. Right now, Hillary Clinton has the advantage. So when people go and vote early right now, well, the polls are in Hillary Clinton's favor. So if people are going to change their mind from slightly leaning toward Hillary to slightly leaning toward Trump, if they're going to change their mind, that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. Well, how many of those people that might have changed their mind slightly to Trump, how many of them have already voted or are voting right now while they're still leaning Hillary? So I'm not trying to be a wet blanket, folks. I want to look at this rationally, logically, and with intellectual honesty. Okay? Donald Trump has a pretty steep mountain to climb to win this election. It's not that it's impossible, but you know, if I were forced to bet money, if I were a betting person and forced to bet money, I would say the odds are that Hillary Clinton wins this election. But that doesn't mean Donald Trump can't pull it out. What matters here, and a big part of this, is going to be voter turnout. Now, here's the thing about the election that comes into Trump's favor. Donald Trump's supporters are way more passionate about Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton supporters are passionate about her. A much bigger percentage of Trump supporters are very enthusiastic. And you can see this by the crowd sizes that, for example, when you go to a Hillary Clinton rally and there's, a few hundred people there. You go to a Donald Trump rally and there's 20,000 people there. Now, that doesn't mean that Donald Trump is leading in the polls. That doesn't mean that Donald Trump would win the election. But what that does mean is that Donald Trump's supporters are more active and enthusiastic than Hillary Clinton's supporters are. Because when Hillary Clinton comes to town, whatever the town is, the Democrats in the town are like, Well, Hillary Clinton's in town. You guys want to go see her? Well, no, I don't know. What's on TV? Let's watch Big Bang Theory instead. Okay? I mean, that's what happens with Democrats, and that's the reason why Hillary Clinton is lucky to fill, 3, 4, 500 seats in the places that she goes to. Now, there are some that she does where there's thousands, but by and large, they're a lot smaller. Whereas Donald Trump, people sit around going, Donald Trump supporters like, hey, Donald Trump is coming into town. What do you want to do? Well, we're going to go see him. Let's go see him. There's an excitement factor. So they're willing. Donald Trump supporters are more willing to get off their butts and drive to the event where Donald Trump is speaking. Whereas Hillary Clinton supporters are not as willing to get off their butts and drive to the event where she's speaking. What that means come election day is that you're going to have a higher percentage of Trump supporters that are willing to get off their butts and go to the polls and stand in line, and a lower turnout for Hillary Clinton and her supporters where they're not going to be as willing, as passionate about getting to the polls. Plus, since most Americans assume that Hillary Clinton's going to win the election anyway, you're liable to get a bunch of Democrats who say, I don't need to go vote for Hillary, she's going to win anyway. Now, in all fairness, you'll get some Republicans who say, I'm not going to go waste my time voting for Donald Trump. He's going to lose anyway. But my guess is that voter turnout is going to be a little bit weaker for Hillary supporters and a little bit stronger for Trump supporters. Now, that's what gives him the advantage going into Election Day. So there's a lot of different things at play here. And here's pretty much what Republicans and Trump supporters are banking on. They're banking on the polls being wrong and this being a Brexit type situation. Now, let me explain. Brexit, you may recall, was the vote for Great Britain to exit the European Union. Remember that from a few months ago? Okay, well, here's the thing. The polls in Great Britain were showing overwhelmingly that Brits did not want to leave the European Union. And so Brexit was going to fail. That's what was assumed, and that's what the polls were showing right up to the end. And then here's what happened. The vote takes place, and what do you know? Brexit passes, and they actually voted to leave the European Union. And then the pollsters are like, wait a minute, we were taking polls right up until the day before. And the polls right up until the day before showed that more people wanted to stay in the European Union than not. So how in the world could it be that did people really change their mind that much? No, that's not what it was. Here's what it was in Great Britain with the Brexit vote. You had those who wanted Brexit, those who wanted to leave the European Union, were much more passionate about their desire to leave the European Union, so therefore a higher percentage of them went to the polls. And those who wanted to stay in the European Union, they weren't as passionate about staying in the EU, and so a lower percentage of them went to the polls. So when the pollsters call someone's home, for example, in Great Britain, and I want to simplify this because I want to make sure you folks understand how the polls work and how it is possible that the polls could be wrong. And I'm not saying that they are. I just want you to understand how it's possible that they could be wrong. In Brexit, the reason the pollsters got that wrong is because the pollsters call people's homes. And when I answer them, hello, they're like, okay, we're asking you, would you like to stay in the European Union or leave the European Union? Well, those who want to stay in the European Union, they're like, well, I prefer to stay in the European Union. But they weren't really that excited about it. They weren't that passionate about it. It didn't matter that much to them. So therefore, while they'll tell somebody on the phone, yeah, I prefer to stay in the EU, come election day, it's not important enough for them to get off their butt and go vote. But then when the same pollster calls someone else's home, and they go, hello, and they're like, would you like to stay in Brexit or leave? And that person goes, oh, I absolutely want Brexit. I want out. I want out of the European Union. So that's a number on that side of the poll, but that person is much more passionate, and so on election day, they're much more apt to go to the polls. Well, that's what's going on to a certain extent, I think, with Donald Trump. The pollsters call homes, and if a Democrat answers the phone, who are you supporting in this election? I'm supporting Hillary. Okay, not excited, but I'm supporting Hillary. Okay, it goes down as a vote for Hillary. Call somebody else. Who are you supporting? I'm supporting Trump. You better believe I'm supporting Trump. Okay. So what happens is less people say they're supporting Trump, but a higher percentage of them are going to go to the polls. Now, that theory I just laid out for you, if that's actually what's going on, then Trump could pull a Brexit kind of surprise and end up winning the election on November 8th. So for those of you out there that desperately do not want Hillary, and hey, I'm one of them, okay, before you get too excited, let me just remind you, let me pour some cold water on your excitement, okay? 40% of the voters will have voted before Election Day. And right now, Hillary Clinton has much more momentum than Donald Trump does. So all the people voting right now is definitely skewing in favor of Hillary Clinton. Now, Fox News is reporting that so far, the results that are being put forward from the early voting tend to show it kind of neck and neck right now. That's what they're showing at this point, neck and neck. So it's pretty close. Here's the problem with that. When you look at Florida, right now, the early Florida numbers of those who have pre-voted show an equal number of Democrats and Republicans that have requested early ballots. It's about 3.1 million that have requested early ballots. So right now it's about split Democrats and Republicans in Florida that are saying we want to vote early. However, in the 2008 election, Barack Obama won the state of Florida. However, Republicans led Democrats 49% to 32% as far as early voting goes. So you had substantially more Republicans voting early in Florida in 2008 than you did Democrats. However, Barack Obama still took Florida. So when you look at Florida right now, it would be nice if early voting showed Republicans with a huge lead, but it doesn't. It shows Republicans and Democrats about 50-50 so far in Florida. That's bad news for Trump, and Florida's a must-win. If Trump loses Florida, he's out for sure. If he loses Ohio, he's out for sure. If he loses North Carolina, he's out for sure. If he loses Iowa, he's out for sure. Those are must-have states for Donald Trump. But it doesn't just stop there. He has to also pick up some other key battleground states, like he has to take either Colorado or maybe Pennsylvania or something like that. So it's still advantage to Hillary, but can't rule out the possibility that Trump could pull this out in a Brexit kind of surprise. So what about this political science professor who has correctly predicted the last 5 presidents